What makes an ordinary man take part in one of the most daring robberies in British history? How did Ronnie Biggs, a small-time crook, become a name forever linked to the Great Train Robbery? What drove him to flee across the world, staying one step ahead of the law for decades? And in the end, what did his freedom truly cost him? This is the incredible story of Ronnie Biggs, tale of crime, escape, and the relentless fight to stay free. In the early hours of August 8, 1963, a Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London was brought to an unexpected halt in the English countryside. What unfolded next would be recorded in the pages of criminal history as the Great Train Robbery. Among the gang of thieves was Ronnie Biggs, whose involvement in the heist and subsequent life on the run transformed him into a notorious figure, capturing the imagination of the public and law enforcement alike. Ronald Arthur Biggs was born on August 8, 1929 in Stockwell, South London, as the youngest of 4 surviving children. His father, a bus driver, was a strict disciplinarian, ensuring a tough upbringing. Growing up in a working-class family during the Great Depression, Biggs faced numerous challenges that shaped his early years. His formative years were marked by the economic hardships of the era, leading him to seek out ways to improve his circumstances, albeit through unlawful means.
Having to be witness to the destruction and death inflicted during the Second World War, where he was evacuated to Flitwick.
Biggs's initial forays into crime were relatively minor, involving petty thefts and burglaries. However, these early offenses set the stage for a criminal career that would escalate dramatically. His frequent troubles with the law landed him in prison multiple times, where he became acquainted with other criminals who would later play pivotal roles in his life. At 18 in 1947, Biggs attempted to steer his life in a different direction by enlisting in the Royal Air Force. However, his rebellious nature soon got the better of him. Just 2 years later, he was dishonorably discharged for desertion after breaking into a local chemist's shop. Rather than reforming, Biggs quickly found himself on the wrong side of the law again. Within a month, he was convicted of stealing a car and sentenced to prison. Upon his release, he took part in a botched robbery at a bookmaker's office in Lambeth, London, another misstep that landed him back behind bars. It was during this stint in HM Prison Wadsworth that he crossed paths with Bruce Reynolds, a meeting that would change the course of his life and set the stage for one of the most infamous crimes in British history. This chance encounter with Reynolds proved to be a turning point in Biggs's life. What started as casual conversations behind prison walls soon led to something far more dangerous, a high-stakes plan that would make history. The idea of robbing a Royal Mail train wasn't born out of impulse. It was driven by the knowledge that these trains regularly transported vast sums of cash, especially after holiday weekends. The plan was bold yet calculated. Intercept the train, subdue the crew, and escape with the money, all without resorting to deadly force. Pulling off such an audacious heist required careful coordination and a team with a unique blend of skills. Ronald Biggs was drawn into the scheme through Bruce Reynolds, a smooth-talking, ambitious criminal with a knack for high-stakes robberies. Reynolds, the mastermind behind what would become the Great Train Robbery, saw potential in Biggs despite his minor reputation in the underworld. Biggs was tasked with a crucial role, finding a train driver who could take control of the targeted train. However, what seemed like a simple assignment soon proved more difficult than expected. The scale of the robbery can only be understood in the context of 1960s Britain. The country was in the midst of a post-war economic boom, a time of both progress and opportunity, but also of growing disparities. As industries flourished and money moved in larger sums, vulnerabilities within the financial system became apparent. It was in this shifting landscape that Reynolds and his crew saw their chance. Their target? The Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London, a moving treasure trove loaded with cash, just waiting for the right men to take it. Bruce Reynolds took the lead in organizing the heist. He knew that such a complex operation required a diverse set of skills, so he meticulously assembled a team of 15 experienced criminals. Each member brought a unique expertise to the table, from tampering with railway signals to handling logistics and moving large sums of cash quickly. One of the key individuals introduced to the gang was Ronald Biggs. At the time, Biggs was a relatively small-time crook who had aspirations of making it big in the criminal underworld. His connection to Reynolds gave him an opportunity to participate in something far more significant than his previous crimes. However, Biggs's role in the heist was not as glamorous as some of his associates. His primary responsibility was to secure the services of a train driver who could operate the train once the original driver had been removed from control. By chance, Biggs, who needed money to put a deposit on a house for his family, was working on the home of a train driver who was about to retire. The driver, known by the aliases Stan Agat, Old Pete, or Pop, had only ever operated shunting trains on the southern region and had no experience handling machine diesel electric trains. Biggs introduced him to the gang, believing he would be able to drive the train after it was hijacked. This seemingly minor detail would later prove to be a major complication in the robbery. With their team assembled and a plan in place, the gang meticulously prepared for the heist that would soon capture the nation's attention. In the early hours of August 8, 1963, coincidentally Biggs' 34th birthday, the gang set their plan into motion near Britigo Bridge in Ledburn, Buckinghamshire. To stop the train, they tampered with the railway signals, changing them from green to red. This forced the train, which was carrying high-value packages and cash, to come to a halt. The plan required precision and timing, and when the train stopped as expected, the robbers, masked and armed with rubber club weapons, rushed toward the train. Jack Mills, the train's driver, initially resisted their demands, determined to protect his cargo. However, when it became clear that their substitute driver, Agat, was unable to operate the modern diesel-electric train due to his experience being limited to older shunting engines, the gang was forced to take drastic measures. Mills was struck on the head with an iron bar, leaving him injured, but alive. With Mills subdued, the gang ordered him to move the train forward to a secluded location near the bridge, where they had planned to unload the money. Once, at the predetermined unloading point, the gang sprang into action. Within the strict time frame set by Reynolds, they unloaded 120 stacks of cash, leaving behind only 8.
At the Slade farm, in the bags, various sources show the suspected yield was £2.6 million, the equivalent of 49 million today. Biggs' share was 147,000, or £3.1 million today. With their timetable for laying low brought forward due to police investigation, Biggs
the total amount stolen was an astonishing £2.6 million, equivalent to around £69.5 million in today's money. Biggs' personal share of the loot was £147,000, worth nearly £3.9 million today. The robbers then made their way to Letherslade Farm, a remote hideout they had secured in advance. There, they planned to lay low until the initial police search cooled down. However, the gang's well-executed plan began to unravel due to a series of careless mistakes. One of the biggest blunders came in the aftermath of the robbery, when the gang attempted to cover their tracks. The gang had intended to destroy all evidence linking them to the crime. The plan was to burn down Letherslade Farm after they left, ensuring that no forensic traces could be found. However, one of their accomplices failed to follow through with the task, leaving the site intact for investigators. When police arrived at the farm, they found fingerprints and other pieces of crucial evidence that led them directly to the robbers. Among the items left behind was a tomato sauce bottle, on which investigators discovered Biggs' fingerprints, an incriminating oversight that would seal his fate. The police launched an extensive investigation, quickly narrowing down their list of suspects through forensic evidence and tips from informants.
Mills was beaten with an iron bar and forced to move the train forward to a nearby bridge over a roadway, which had been chosen as the unloading point by the gang. The robbers unloaded.
Just 3 weeks after the heist, Biggs was arrested in South London along with 11 other members of the gang.
Biggs served 15 months before escaping from Wandsworth Prison on 8th of July 1965.
Despite their capture, the bulk of the £2.6 million was never recovered. In 1964, 9 of the 15-strong gang, including Biggs, were put on trial and found guilty. The severity of their sentences reflected the sheer audacity of the crime. Biggs, along with several others, received a 30-year prison sentence, a harsh punishment intended to serve as a warning to similar crimes in the future. Despite the gang's careful planning and initial success, a combination of unforeseen errors and missteps ultimately led to their downfall. The Great Train Robbery remains one of the most infamous crimes in British history, with Biggs' involvement cementing his place in the annals of criminal folklore. However, his story did not end with his conviction. His next move would shock the world and turn him into a fugitive on the run. Ronald Arthur Biggs had no intention of spending 30 years behind bars. After just 15 months at Wadsworth Prison in London, he orchestrated a daring escape that stunned authorities and captivated the public. On that fateful afternoon in July 1965, Biggs and 3 other inmates were in the exercise yard when a masked man suddenly appeared on the 20-foot-high prison wall. With swift precision, he tossed down a rope ladder and a steel ladder. The prisoners wasted no time. They scrambled up and vanished over the wall. Guards tried to stop them, but other inmates created a distraction, blocking their way. On the other side, a red furniture van was waiting. A nearby resident, Miss Winifred Williams, witnessed the audacious plan unfold from her window. She saw a man in blue overalls and a silk scarf setting up the ladder, while another figure, wearing a stocking mask and wielding a rifle, stood near a green Ford Zephyr. Realizing the danger, she quickly locked the door. Once over the wall, the escapees dropped onto the van's roof and disappeared inside through a hidden opening. When police later found the abandoned van, it contained overalls and a loaded shotgun. Clear evidence that the breakout had been meticulously planned. At least 3 getaway cars were involved, making it nearly impossible to track Biggs's escape route. The prison break sent shockwaves through Britain. Authorities launched an immediate manhunt, and Scotland Yard warned that the fugitives might be armed. Detectives suspected inside help. Biggs's daring flight from justice not only embarrassed the British penal system, but also elevated him to legendary status. Among those who admired his defiance, he became a folk hero, a man who outwitted the system and vanished into the world, his adventure only just beginning. Biggs's journey as a fugitive took him across continents. He initially fled to France, undergoing plastic surgery to alter his appearance. From there, he moved to Australia, living under assumed identities to evade capture. However, with the police closing in, he sought refuge in Brazil, a country without an extradition treaty with the UK at the time. In Brazil, Biggs carved out a new life, fathering a son with a local woman, which further complicated any attempts to extradite him. As Biggs became more famous, he took advantage of his notoriety by speaking to the media and even offering Ronnie Biggs tours for curious visitors. Though he lived in plain sight, he avoided capture for years, thanks in part to Brazil's laws protecting parents of Brazilian-born children. As age and health issues caught up with him, Biggs's life in Brazil became increasingly challenging.
The tube for feeding and had difficulty speaking. The 30th of July 2009, it was claimed by representatives of Biggs that he'd been given permission to challenge the decision to refuse him parole.
In 2001, he made the surprising decision to return to the UK, stating his desire to receive medical care and spend his remaining years in his homeland. Upon arrival, he was arrested and re-imprisoned to serve the remainder of his sentence. Biggs's health continued to deteriorate, and after several strokes and other ailments, he was released on compassionate grounds in 2009. He spent his final years in a care home, passing away on December 18th, 2013, at the age of 84. After years on the run, Ronald Biggs became more than just a fugitive. He became a legend. From the daring Great Train Robbery to his bold escape and life in exile, his story was one of risk, adventure, and constant pursuit. But in the end, freedom came at a cost. Was it worth it? That's a question only Biggs himself could truly answer. One thing is certain. His name will forever be tied to one of the most infamous crimes in British history. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to Breakout Bank for more videos.